Yeah, you're in North Haven.
Yes, yeah, just about, I don't know, about 5 miles north of New Haven. All right, here we go. Good evening and welcome to Slate School. Tonight, we're very excited about our conversation with Jason McLennan about healthy building. Hi, Jason.
Hi there.
Just take a minute here and I'll introduce everyone to Slate School and then I'll introduce our amazing guest and we'll get started. Slate School is committed to excellence in education, and we are delighted to present the Education Idea Lab, which is a unique virtual series that is free and open to the public. This thought-leading event convenes leaders, change makers, and participants from all sectors of education and innovation. So thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have all of you with us here today. My name is Julie Mountcastle, and I'm head of school at Slate School. So I'll briefly introduce you to Slate School and then we'll hear from our guests. So Slate School is an independent 501c3 nonprofit elementary school where education is focused on cultivating creativity, fostering ingenuity, and inspiring a deep passion for lifelong learning. At Slate School, we have formed a community that is constantly striving to improve practice, to create meaningful educational experience for learners of all ages, and to change the landscape in education. Slate School convenes experts for important, authentic conversations about education, and these online dialogues, just like tonight's, are free and open to the public. So we're so delighted to have all of you with us, and we would invite you to submit additional questions as comments on Facebook, and we will select some of those questions to ask our guest today. Jason McLennan is considered one of the world's most influential individuals in the field of architecture and the green building movement. He is a highly sought out architect, designer, and consultant and thought leader around the planet. He is the recipient of the prestigious Buckminster Fuller Prize, the planet's top prize for socially responsible design. He has been called the Steve Jobs of the green building industry, a world changer by GreenBiz magazine, and he is an Award of Excellence winner for Engineering News Record, one of the only individuals in the architecture profession to have won the award in its 50-year history. Jason is the founder of the International Living Future Institute and is the CEO of McLennan Design, his own architectural and planning practice, designing some of the world's most advanced green buildings. He is the creator of the Living Building Challenge, which is the most stringent and progressive green building program in existence, as well as a primary author of the Well Building Standard. He is the author of 6 books on sustainability and design, and Ashoka Fellow, and Senior Fellow of the Design Futures Council. So how do we get so lucky to have you here tonight? Thank you so much for coming, Jason. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So I was actually starting to think when they would start referring to Steve Jobs as the Jason McLennan of his field after I read your bio. So let's just jump right in. I'm, our interest in your work, well, your work has inspired our work here and informed the construction of our school in such a profound way. Our school here is one of the most environmentally friendly schools in the country. And so I guess I would just like to begin tonight by asking you to maybe describe your journey to this passionate interest in healthy buildings, and how did you come to just disrupt this landscape of building and architecture?
Well, there's a lot I could share with you, but the reason why I was happy to join you today is because I was lucky in my formative years to be exposed to a real story of regeneration that really inspired my whole career. And it's really important that young children get opportunities to be exposed to issues of the environment and lots of different things, as you know very well, or you wouldn't be in this profession. But I grew up in northern Canada, so north of you, in Ontario, in a mining town that was infamous for environmental degradation in a really polluted place, the largest point source of acid rain in the world when I was growing up, and a real moonscape. But when I was young, I was part of a massive regreening campaign that the community led that eventually won a United Nations commendation. And so they involved the children of all the schools in planting trees and helping to heal the community and the soil. And it's, I believe, the largest urban reforestation project that's happened. And so, you know, I got to participate actively as a child in the healing of my community. And trees that my friends and I planted grew up alongside of us, and we, you know, as a community, changed a moonscape to a greenscape. Over hundreds and hundreds of miles, this community was transformed. And Sudbury is a very different place to visit now than it was in the 1970s and earlier. And so that really got me started on my journey to be an agent of regeneration, recognizing that humanity has a choice between being an agent of degradation or an agent of regeneration. And I always choose the latter whenever I have a choice. So, yeah, lots of things we could unpack, but that's the beginning of the story anyway.
Wow, Jason, that is incredible. You know, it's so funny, you know, when we're all sort of searching here as educators and with our kids, we're always looking for that moment, that spark when, you know, the child actually discovers something that for them is so important and could be that passion that carries them
Yeah.
through their lives in much in the same way that you're talking about. And it's funny, I mean, we see nothing like, you know, that landscape here, but as educators, sometimes I think we feel like we see that landscape in education a little bit. So I think maybe we're inspired in a similar way, but maybe less so. But I'm wondering now, when I hear that story, I wonder if there's a connection now to the name, the Living Building Institute. Is there something about that journey that has guided you to that name? It's
Well,
amazing.
I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than life itself. And so the whole notion of life and living really is where it's at, as far as I'm concerned. So I've always been attracted to that. And when it was time to name this program that I authored, the Living Building Challenge, it had to be centered on life and life's principles. That's how we, you know, in the end, that's how we should be evaluating our success with anything that humanity creates, whether it's architecture, which is my profession, or the making of products, which is other people's professions. Anything that we do in the world, we should be setting up things so that we're creating conditions that are healthy for life and not degrading life. And so that's really the framework. And living, everyone gets it when you talk about something that's living, something that's breathing, something that's alive, that's healthy. And so we choose our words pretty carefully for, you know, a certain impact that we're trying to have.
So, so for people who may be a little less familiar with what you do with the Living Building Institute, do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like in practice, and
Yeah.
maybe what you hope that it will look like in practice going forward?
Sure. And we actually renamed the Institute the Living Future Institute a little while ago because we focus on really everything, not just buildings, but communities, products, you know, really so many things. So we realized that the umbrella organization, the Institute, the Living Future Institute, really had to have a broader name than Living Buildings. But um, the Living Building Challenge is this framework for architecture that really asks people to imagine a world that is not a less bad version of what we have, but it is a good version of what we should have and used to have. And how do we actually create buildings that don't diminish the potential for life, but actually enhance the conditions for life using nature's principles? And it's not utopia, it's not theory, it's a reality. We know how to build very, very differently in terms of how we use energy, in terms of materials, in terms of water, in terms of habitat impacts and impacts on human health. And we've been doing this now on projects around the world, really having a very different level of performance. And probably a lot of people listening know LEED, and LEED is one sort of framework, and the Living Building Challenge is really meant to go way beyond LEED Platinum. And again, really push people to think, how do I build in a way that is truly good? What does that look like? And it's not always easy to do, but that's where we should be striving.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, when I take people on tours of Slate School, I start talking about some of the properties of this school that make it so healthy to be in. And in the end, I find myself just saying, I feel great here 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day. My only difficulty here in this setting is leaving, because nowhere else I go in my life is as healthy as my school. My house is 100 years old. It has, a lot of charm to it, but it's not the same. So I guess I'm wondering how we mobilize people when they're most of the buildings that I visit in my path in my life are not, they're not Living Future Institute buildings. They've been here for a long time. How do we mobilize to help people kind of do what they need to do to sort of, I don't know if retrofit is the right word, or rebuild? What do we do?
Well, we certainly can actually improve all of our old existing buildings. It isn't just about building new buildings. The first thing we should always try to do is repurpose and reimagine and reinvigorate the structures that we have to be healthier, to be more energy efficient, to run off of renewable energy and that kind of thing. So, that's something that it's important to first acknowledge, that certainly we need to build differently for the new buildings, but we need to improve what's around us already in dramatic fashion. And we have more and more examples. And really that's the key to this, is showing people real projects. So when you build your new school, it becomes a beacon of hope and inspiration for all the parents that drop their children there off, and others in the community that see it, and that inspires other change. In all the work that we do, the way we create change and get people to see things differently around architecture is to show them and to invite them to participate. We use inspiration rather than guilt to get people excited. We don't, preach and wag our fingers. We educate, and then we demonstrate. And by doing so and walking the talk, it is, really powerful in terms of bringing people to the realization that they can live very differently. Their company can operate very differently, and it is working. It's just that it's not working fast enough. We need to, be creating change at a much faster rate than we are right now.
It's funny. There's a good kind of impatience in that, I think.
Well, urgency.
Yeah.
We have to get our heads around.
It's funny you said, we don't make people feel guilty, and we say all the time here, nobody does better when they feel bad. Nobody really makes better choices when they're feeling terrible about themselves. And I guess I wonder about the kids here in my class. They're 7 and 8, and we have K's first graders over there, 5 and 6 years old, and we're really trying to plant a seed with them, not just in that we have an incredibly wonderful place to go to school, but we're trying to plant a seed that says, whatever you see out there, whatever it is that's unique about you, and whatever you see, you should be able to follow that path. And it seems as though you've done that. There wasn't somebody else standing at the head of the class saying, here's one of your options for career choices. You've actually kind of created your own. And I just wonder what advice you might give to children who are in schools that, and they're trying to find their way. What advice would you give to them?
Well, I do always try to tell people to follow their passion and follow their heart, which, is is pretty common advice, but it actually does tend to stack up. I mean, I certainly had educators and folks that did try to limit my potential, so to speak. But I also was really lucky to have other educators, teachers that were amazing, and my parents and others in my community encouraged me to pursue, my passions and pursue, this whole line of inquiry that I ended up doing. And really, my career is really a story of following my bliss. And it took me around the world and took me to all sorts of places. And at the key thing is not being afraid of failure. And, we can unpack that more, but what I would always tell kids is to not, failure is the best teacher, and embrace it and celebrate when you mess something up, just learn from it. And that's a hard lesson in our society in particular. We don't do a very good job of helping people celebrate their failures and to learn from it. We really put on high the winner, and and we don't listen to the lessons all around us every day. So that's one aspect that we can unpack for sure.
Yeah, that's great. We talk here about the learning journey,
Mhm.
and how it's not, there are a lot of valleys and a lot of hills in it, and it goes on forever. And for a while you might be struggling up the hill, but then later you'll find your way and be able to coast a little bit. Um, I'm wondering if you have any what are some favorite projects of yours, and do they have something significant in common?
Well, I think what's in common about my favorite projects are the people that are really passionate about this kind of work. When you have a client that really gets it, that is mission driven, so to speak, they want to create a better world for their company, for their students, if it's a school. That's when it gets really exciting. We have a couple living building projects in Connecticut that are really exciting. One that we're going to break ground on in the next couple months.
No kidding.
And I can't share too much about it yet, but I will be sharing stuff soon about it. And it's a great project down the road from you guys.
Great.
And it's well, it's in another part of the state, but it's not a big state. And then we've been working with the School of Divinity on a living building project at Yale that we're fundraising for. And that's a very exciting thing, and just another great example of, in that case, a dean and a faculty that really got behind this idea of doing living buildings. And so all the projects that we do anywhere in the country or around the world, the people is what makes it magical. And I would also, of course, the site as well. Sometimes, like this photo behind me is a wonderful place that we have a little project, and obviously the land can speak to you in really powerful ways as well. So yeah.
Do you get back to Sudbury to work there ever?
Well, with COVID, I'm not going anywhere these days, it seems.
Well, yeah.
But I have been going more recently. They actually opened up a school of architecture in my hometown, which was, can't believe it happened. I had to leave, and go far to get the education I wanted. But now there's a school of architecture there, the McEwen School of Architecture, and I'm on the board of directors, and it's really great to go back and see, this kind of thinking now, beginning to embed in Sudbury.
How great. How great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
How much do you well, I mean, it sounds like you really do suggest that what you do in your entire career here is a result of that challenge at the beginning of your life.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
so that this incredible great thing, this wonderful career, this movement was born of adversity and challenge and difficulty and problems. And
Yep.
a story like that gives everybody hope, right? No matter what the circumstances, you can make something amazing from it.
Yeah, and I only told you half the story, Julie. I became an environmentalist at a young age because of this arc of regeneration, so to speak, with the mining impacts and then planting trees. But I also realized I wanted to be an architect when I was in middle school, yeah, which is a pretty young age to sort of understand your whole career path.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I was a bit of an unusual child, maybe, but I witnessed development happen in my town that undid a lot of the good that we were doing. And there was one project in particular where a developer came along and bought up this hillside that my friends and I had planted trees on several years earlier. And the first thing the developer did is cut down all the trees we had planted as children.
Oh,
And then the next thing they did was scrape away all the soil that we had drag bags of lime up the hills to change the pH balance, sort of on the backs of children, healing a landscape. A developer buys it and destroys all the work. And that taught me another lesson. And that's when I decided that I wanted to be an architect and I was going to change the way we design our communities. Because if we don't do that as well, then we're not headed in a good direction. And the power of development and design to impact the planet is huge. And so that also was part of my Subway story, and that sort of a 1-2 punch
yeah.
that sort of not only made me aware of the issues, but then gave me a mission to do something about it. And so I left on that journey to figure out how to do this work.
Is that development still there on the side of the hill?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like there's a million developments like it. There's nothing special, but it was a big box store, and what they did is they cut down trees, put in a parking lot, put in a dumb box to sell crap from overseas that none of us needed, and that was part of this larger paradigm of consumerism and really not paying attention. And the whole point of this work is really to say we need to think differently, and we can choose to have one kind of impact on the world and on people's health, and we can choose to have another. And right now, we as a society externalize all of our impacts on the poor, on people of color, on the environment, and really on all of us in the end. And that's a huge problem. And it's a design problem in many ways. It's a political problem, but it's also a design problem. We can design things differently to not have those externalities, those unintended or sometimes intended consequences. We can have the opposite effect. We can deliberately solve for life. We can create habitat when we design a place. We can plant more trees and we can build more soil. We can save water and we can regenerate in the same way that we can destroy. And it's a matter of education and then choice.
What do you think is the greatest challenge to this? It's you've got a movement,
Well,
but
yeah.
what prevents it from really, taking hold in a way that changes things faster?
Well, it's always people, right? The biggest barrier is not technological. We have all the technologies we need to do everything different. Every year it gets better, the technology, but we don't need any more. And the economics are actually really good. It's really comes down to people put things in the way, that different values come to play, and ignorance comes into play, and inertia is a big one, just sort of the way things have been done, and people are resistant to change. They're
Yeah.
afraid of change, and all those things together creates an inertia in the way that it's been going, that it's so hard to turn around. It's so hard to get people to stop, and then it's really hard to get them to turn around and go in the other direction. And I'm sure you've experienced that with all sorts of other things.
Well, I think that's always the problem, right? No
Oh,
matter what,
exactly.
you have to stop doing the thing that's hurting yourself, and then
Mhm.
you have to figure out how to change, and then you have to try that, and it's not easy. It's not easy. We're people of habit. I have a
But
little, you
yeah,
know, I have a little lump on my finger because I hold a pencil in a weird way. Now I know that I could change that, but I'd have to stop doing it the way I'm doing it now and change it forever. But
True
but
enough.
we don't always follow our own advice even,
That's
we don't
true.
follow our own advice. So I feel like you have just this engaging sort of vision here, and you are clearly leading in this area. Um, how do you balance the leadership piece with the being humble and listening and being receptive and trying to really hear your client or the people that you're working with?
Well, I'll say again, I'm Canadian, so there's a certain amount that comes with being Canadian, and growing up in a mining town, you can never take yourself too seriously, or someone's going to knock you a new one on the ice. And if I was a hockey player, and so I'm joking, but I think it's true that you can't take yourself too seriously in the end. But you do have to fight for what you believe in, and sometimes that takes being a bit audacious at the same time, and other times you have to shut up long enough to hear. So you have to be humble and listen if you're going to try to serve the world. You have to step into it first, learning about the context, what your client needs. We always say in our business that we have more than one client, no matter who we're working with, and the clients that are unseen are often the more important ones that we serve. So we serve the land. So if someone hires me to design something in a place like this image behind me, I have an obligation to listen to what it needs and to provide what it needs in a solution that, again, makes it healthier because I showed up, not worse because I showed up. And if I could do that and also serve my clients' needs, then that's where the success is. But that's really hard, and
Yeah.
you do have to listen to a lot of things, but you also have to be strong enough to express conviction, and to push ideas that are right. And not every client's ready for that either. So.
Have you had to walk away from some?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We choose our clients. Why? I always interview my clients when they're interviewing me. And we do have, we only, first of all, I only work on deep green projects. So if a client is not interested in the values that I bring, then we're not meant to work together. I'm not going to lower my sense of what's right in the world to make money. I'm going to invite people to work with us to do something great. And I think, and there's, a lot of possibilities that emerge out of that. But, and sometimes we learn that a client is not the right client, and we part ways. So
That must be challenging, though.
uh, sometimes, but usually it just makes sense. It's usually, becomes evident that we don't see the world in the same way.
So, what can we do here at Slate School and everywhere else? How can we improve education around this idea of around the importance of healthy buildings? How can we help?
Well, I think I don't know your school that well, but from what I do know, I think it's important to be teaching authentically. So, if you're going to be teaching these issues, you should make sure that your facilities are as green as they can be, that you're walking your talk, because I think kids pick up on that. And certainly, people that are paying attention as adults are picking up on that. Are you practicing what you preach? And I think the next thing is really that you're looking for for pedagogical sort of opportunities all around you. That's in the world at large, not just what's in the book, but certainly that as well. How can your building that you're going to build actually be used as a teaching tool? You're investing in this big asset. It shouldn't be a passive backdrop for your education. It should be an armature for learning. And there's so many things you can teach children based upon how the sun moves and where the water goes. And for the most part, really teaching children to think about systems rather than parts. And our society teaches us about things and parts and moments, and we lack this coherent understanding of wholes. And that's what's needed. And you can't unsee it when you learn it. When a kid gets where does my food come from? And they understand that, they make certain decisions in the rest of their life that's very different than if they think that food comes from a grocery store in a plastic wrapped thing. And when they understand what it means to generate energy and what it means to use energy and the interconnections of everything and pollution, they think differently. And that's the gift that you can give them, is to connect them to the upstream and downstream realities of life that they are playing a part in, and revealing that in their everyday, that they are important, they matter in the impacts on the world. It isn't just like learn to recycle, which is actually fine, but it's this wholly inadequate lesson that we're teaching, that it doesn't matter what you buy as long as you recycle, is this incomplete and poor story that's being told to our kids. And there's a richer, bigger story that we need to be telling on so many levels. So
Yeah, it's funny. I think we can do better, actually.
yeah,
Even here, where we're trying to do all those things that you're talking about.
we can do better.
I'll say we arrived at school this year and our pond was dry. We'd had very, very little rain over the summer, and there was a lot of talk about how we could refill the pond and what should we do. And they were, and then suddenly there was this day where all the kids kind of realized, well, are the animals going to return to our campus if there's no water here?
Yeah.
And that, that became like a big, huge realization. And then what followed that was, well, what do people do when their water source dries up? And, fortunately for us, because, we really do want to say to children that the world is a hopeful place. It rained and the pond was renewed. And it was really a beautiful thing. And I've never seen more excited children and, measuring it and all of that and recognizing that. But, because it came from a moment of loss. There was none. There was, and what the impacts could be. And when I first pulled in the driveway and saw that it was dry, I thought, this is terrible. And now, 3 months later, I'm so happy it happened. So, it's one of those places where you think a mistake or a difficulty is going to be a problem. And it's actually something wonderful. It's an opportunity. I'm wondering if you've had some mistakes that have turned in your favor in your past.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, my life is riddled with failure, but so is everyone's.
Yeah.
And, but it's all in what you do with it. And too many people get sort of frozen from it, when in fact it's a gift. And you make yourself better with each failure, and you learn something more with each time. And that, that's a good thing. So yeah, there's millions of examples, unfortunately or fortunately.
Well, probably fortunately, right?
Absolutely.
Probably fortunately.
Yeah, it's all our attitude with how we view them.
Do you feel like you learned something with every project that moves you to the next project?
Yeah, you do. Sometimes you learn, sometimes you recognize what it is later. It's not always right in the moment sometimes you're frustrated, disappointed. We get attached, and that's at the heart of all suffering, is attachment. And being attached to outcomes that we've, our ego, like, well, I designed it this way, and isn't it clever and beautiful? And yeah, it might have been clever and it might have been beautiful, but it wasn't meant to be. And our, we suffer when we're too attached to it, when there's something else that we weren't, meant to do, perhaps. But so sometimes it takes some time to get over that, and then you realize, oh, isn't this interesting? Here's what happened because of that. That's actually even better. Or something I can learn going forward. So.
What does a week look like for you?
Well, right now it's a lot of Zooms. There's.
Do you have the blue, right? Do you have the blue glasses? Do you have the?
No, no, I don't. But I hide a lot. I don't always go on camera anymore. There's just too many of them. And then I can look outside while I talk or whatever. But no, it's, I used to travel all the time because my projects were in lots of places. And it's been nice not traveling, to be honest with you. But it's weird how Zoom and related platforms have kind of taken over. Um, and so we work on a lot of different types of projects, and so it tends to be I'm pretty scripted these days, jumping from project to project and working with different people right now. But it's fun for the most part.
How has it impacted that feeling, getting the feeling of the place?
Well, yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing is that we always visit the places we design for because we kind of feel it's irresponsible not to. So luckily I mean, I'm hoping that we get through COVID in time for certain things to happen on certain projects. But we also have technology, drones, photography, Google Earth that help us out. And we're still, going to certain places that we can get to more readily. But yeah, it's just this moment in time we're in is a little different though. Yeah.
There's such a surge in these different technologies right now. If it weren't for this COVID business, we wouldn't be having that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to look for the positive and the negative.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting something right now in those technologies that may be valuable
Yeah.
in the future in ways we have no idea. But thinking about the future, what do you hope to see in 5 years in terms of how we're building and how we're living?
Well, I've been, doing a lot of talks lately where I've been telling people that this year, 2020, which a lot of people, 2020's been this insane year as it has been. But I've been, describing it as the year of perfect vision, 2020 vision. And, my mentor coined that back in the 1990s, and he was way ahead of his time. He said, 2020, I have a feeling is going to be the year that we get clarity around all the issues we need to address. And I remember it stuck in my head. And so I've been talking about that as saying, look, this is the year that I think it became clear to many people that we were not dealing with issues of systemic racism in this country, that we were not focusing on climate change, that we, in a real way, that we are not focusing on health outcomes and making sure that everyone has adequate access to health care. There's a whole host of lessons that are right here in front of us if we're willing to look clearly, because you can't hide it. Some people are still closing their eyes, but that's the challenge of humanity. And I hope in the next 5 years that this year ends up being a catalyst as we emerge from COVID, that we don't fall back into old patterns. That, like we talked about before, I'm hoping that this is the nudge we have needed to make more significant change, because there is urgency here. It's not something, especially climate change, is not something that's a far off issue anymore. Unfortunately, it's now here, and it's significant, and we have to make huge changes that are going to force themselves upon us very soon, and are already starting to. And I used to, it's not that long ago, I used to talk about how we needed to make these changes so that the worst didn't happen, and now it's really the worst is beginning to happen, and we are now having to mitigate, as much as we can. And so, I'm hoping that we have learned our lesson and we emerge and we decarbonize our society. And that's the fundamental first thing we need to do with climate change is we need to decarbonize everything. No more fossil fuels. No more fossil fuels. Stop buying gas cars. Don't buy another one ever again. That's one message.
Okay.
Next car, don't buy a gas car. Buy electric. Buy solar for your roof. Get rid of natural gas. Don't install another natural gas thing in your life ever, anywhere. These are things we need to do, and they're huge, and they're better for people's health. They're better for your pocketbook. They're, it's a win-win for most people. So I could go on for a long time.
Maybe we'll come back to that. So in your field, you probably have a fair amount of management that you have to do in your job. Not, I'm guessing that that part of your day is visionary leader and part of your day is manager. Here's my vision, and now how it is implemented in the world is part of your daily life too. And I wonder how you balance those, because I think they're very different parts of the brain.
Well, they are. I also employ really good people.
Well, that's a great thing. Me too.
If you have the luxury of doing that, you should always surround yourself with people that are better at things than you are, and that allow you to move and be a leader. So we're not as bogged down in certain things. So yes, there's always management, but to the great extent possible, there's other people that manage as much as possible, so that I'm freed up to do what I'm the best at. And that's, an important thing for a CEO.
What inspires you, Jason?
Well, great educators like you inspire me. But I'm inspired by people really trying their best to make the world better. I'm inspired by that tree outside my window. That's the great thing about all of this, is how lucky we are. How lucky we are to be born in this moment in time, and how lucky we are to live in such an amazing, beautiful world as this, with such great people, and beautiful living things all around us. And that's what we fight for. And even though the world is in many ways a degraded version of what it once was, from when you and I were born, and there's still so much beauty to save, and still so much to be thankful for. So I'm inspired by that, and I'm hopeful that we can make fundamental change in a short amount of time to save what's left.
Awesome. What's next? What are you excited about that you're working on right now? Can you tell us? Still something, just a tidbit.
Well, I'm just really lucky right now. I've got a lot of great projects, and we're God, I don't even know what to tell you about. In Seattle, for example, we just announced the Climate Pledge Arena, which is going to be the world's greenest hockey and entertainment venue.
No kidding.
Hockey player. It's the first fully zero carbon arena in the world. All the energy, so we decarbonized. We got rid of all the natural gas. Fully electric, including the Zamboni is electric, because it's for the new hockey team. And then all the energy to power the facility will be powered by renewable energy, solar and wind, some on-site and some off-site, so all clean energy powering it. And then we went even further, and we are accounting for all the carbon produced by every fan and every entertainer and every person that comes to the venue. We're counting their carbon, and we're offsetting 100% of the carbon for the entire operations, for all the purchasing, for all the travel. No one's ever done any of this before at this level. And this is NHL hockey. This is the biggest platform for hockey in the land. and we've set a new benchmark, and that project's under construction, and it's a great partnership there. And it's called the Climate Pledge Arena. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Wow. Getting it right out there with the name too. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're banning single-use plastic in the arena. We're targeting zero waste operations. It's phenomenal. And it'll influence millions of people. So there's projects like that, and at that scale, and then there's projects like zero energy homes we're doing that are little small projects and everything in between. So and we're not alone, as you mentioned. This is a movement. There's so many talented architects and engineers, developers around the globe that are doing these projects that are really different. And each time that they are successful, they create a ripple of change around them that inspires others. Like when we worked on the Bullitt Center here in Seattle, it really, Dennis Hayes' project in Seattle with the Bullitt Foundation, it really changed minds around what was possible for office buildings. In sunny Seattle, the Bullitt Center makes more energy than it uses. So it's net positive to the grid in Seattle for a 6-story Class A office building that has all the creature comforts that you would expect in an office building, and we generate more energy than we use, and so on. It's really quite amazing. So we need more of these stories.
So what's your advice? What's your encouragement to the architect who is inclined to try and follow this path?
Well, there's a whole community. I would encourage them to join the Living Future Institute, living-future.org, and network. And there's groups in every community pretty much now. And so you're not alone is the message. There's a network, and there's lots of material available to help people.
Great.
Yeah.
So I heard you a while back here, this conversation mention your mentor. And I don't need to know who that is, but I'd love to know what it was about that person that makes you refer to them as that.
Well, I've had many mentors. I've been very lucky, but I've also sought them out. And that's an important lesson, of course, for kids is to seek out mentors, and mentors come in all shapes and sizes and backgrounds, as you know, of course, as an educator. But my great professional mentor was Mr. Bob Berkebile, who is an architect in Kansas City. And I worked with Bob for 10 years and eventually became his partner. And Bob was a student of Buckminster Fuller's, who some of you may know. So kind of interesting path there. And Bob was just and he still is. He's doing great things as we speak. But Bob was a very gracious mentor and highly collaborative and willing to share and inclusive. And so, yeah, I worked, closely with him for many, many years.
And do you find yourself in that position now as mentor to others?
Yeah, I think so. But I think the more gray hair you get, the more opportunities emerge.
That's true.
I don't know if I'm as good a mentor as Bob was, but certainly try when I can. Yeah.
Well, you've mobilized a lot of people to take action and to sort of believe in your vision. So I think whether you know it or not, you're a mentor to many. So I know that there are a lot of people that are on this Zoom that are feeling very grateful right now because of what you've done. I don't know. There's so many things I'd like to ask, but I guess I'd ask you just in the end if there was one thing that you could leave us with tonight, either about your personal mission, or about how you view, being a leader, period. Just curious what that would be.
Well, I would tell people not to self-limit. And one of the things that I find is, and I have a whole philosophy that I won't burden you with right now, but I call it my 3/4 big philosophy. And it's really about putting ideas out into the world and getting feedback, being willing to fail, and not self-limiting. Going for the ideal. Earlier we talked about certainly a fear of failure. And we talked about how change can be hard for people. And what I have found is that for the most part, it's the act of change that is the most difficult rather than the size of the change. But we often have this sort of notion that we always have to take baby steps and don't change too much and don't stick your neck out too far. And what we end up doing is working our lives towards something that was never what we wanted to end up with in the first place. And how unfortunate is that? And so I always tell people that we should try to really take the time to envision the end game. What is it really that is the highest potential that you want to achieve in any area of your life? And hold that and work as hard as you can towards that. Don't start out, as everyone does, by self-limiting. And it's ripe in business and society and parenting and teaching. I see it all the time. And it's this, well, why would we do that? So, because if you play the math out and you play the time scale out, if we're going to work on something and we work and work and work, and in the end, what we've achieved is a compromise that we didn't really even, it's not even what success looks like. But what are we doing? And so there's a whole philosophy I have around this kind of thinking that allows people the freedom then to make bigger changes, bigger leaps than they thought was possible. Because it's self-limitation, right? That is the enemy here. Self-esteem. Yeah. And so I often say I have a bone to pick with perfectionists. And that, is a real important thing. It's really freeing when you take this other approach, and what you can accomplish, is so much greater and so much more rewarding. And that's how you build movements, because if there's an open invitation then to co-create in a different way, I think. So I don't know if that gets at what you.
Yeah. But now I want to know if there was a moment when you discovered this philosophy, or did it just evolve over time?
I think that one evolved over time, as a kind of an understanding of, a lot of self-reflection of, well, that didn't work. Why did that not work? Or why am I doing this? We did all this and it still sucks. I don't want this to suck. I want this to be great. Why can't I do that? Why can't we do this? And so I've spent a lot of time trying to understand the barriers to change. I mean, my work around is really about, we've had to remove code, restrictions on rainwater catchment and composting. We've had to change materials. Like, my whole career has been fighting against inertia and sort of a system that was designed to, create why we have the cities the way we do. There's a reason why buildings and cities look the way they do. It was designed for that. And so, I've had to bash my head very stubbornly into all these walls. And so in doing so, you either get brain damage or you figure out a way to you figure out a way to navigate. And I think it came out of that process of saying, oh, no, I have to change. If I want to change this, I have to change. Otherwise it's going to just bring me down. It's just going to, bring me down to a place of despair, which doesn't help anybody.
Nobody does better when they feel bad.
True.
Is there something that you still ache to do? Something that you still really want to do that you haven't been able to do yet?
Oh, millions of things.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I'm thinking about my students right now, and I'm focused on what I think they would want to know
Mm,
from you.
mm.
And I think one question they like to ask people, and we're lucky we do something called side by side learning here, although it's now kind of Zoom by side learning these days. But we love to watch people work. We like to watch people work more than we like to watch people perform. We like to see people make mistakes when they're practicing, and we like to see people just work.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that they often ask is, well, they always ask, why do you do it that way?
Mm,
And eventually somebody comes around to ask, what do you love about what you do? What do
mm.
you love about what you're doing? Because, they're kids, and they haven't gotten dinged up, and they believe that you should absolutely be able to love what you do.
Yeah, well, they're right.
They are right. I believe it. I believe it. But so I'll ask for them. What do you love about what you do?
Well, you never love everything about what you do. But but you but you're right. I mean, I do love what I do. I like helping people envision a future that doesn't exist for them and helping them figure out how to get there and removing those barriers. And that's fun. So it could be the design of a new building, or it could be, we do a lot of sustainability consulting in addition to architecture and planning. I do product design, so really, it almost doesn't matter what kind of project I have, as long as the ethics and the values are in alignment and there's a willingness on the client to try to do something that is profound, that is, important, and changes something for the better. And so, I've designed a living carpet. I've just, worked on, and so it's fun. I love what I do because I get to play in all these different spaces and get exposed to, you know, all sorts of crazy things that I never would have, fully thought when I was 8, growing up in northern Canada, northern Ontario. I wouldn't have thought that I would be doing any of the things that I've been doing. I've been very lucky to have, worked with world leaders and, all sorts of craziness in between, from the most humble projects to the most audacious. And each one has been really rewarding in a different way, you know. Um, so I love that. What I do is different every day, and every year is a little different. Um, but I think the key to it is not to sell yourself, your values out. You can't love what you do if you're ashamed of it. You can't love what you do if you know that you're harming. And that's really, the key for your students is to really be clear about what they believe in. you know Teaching them right and wrong matters, I think, and that moral compass that helps guide them to do things that is in alignment, that they can feel good about what they're doing.
If one of my students said to me, I want to be like him. I want to do what he does. Um, what should I tell them? What should they? Is there something they should focus on?
It's a good question. I mean, everyone has their own journey, and I would tell them, why don't you do better than that guy's stuff? I mean, well, I'm not a bar. It's everyone has got beautiful gifts, and and they need to find it, right? And they need help. The teachers and parents, they have to help them, and the kids have to help themselves. They have to work hard. This is not an easy thing. If you want to do good in the world, it takes a lot of perseverance, certain amount of stubbornness, confidence, which is hard. But they're worthy, as you wouldn't be in this.
They are. They
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, that's the key, is that they are beautiful and they are worthy, and they need to find their path to do the best that they can. And it will be hard, because the siren song that plays is selling out. and selling yourself out and self-limiting and checking expectations and being lazy and distraction. Now it's fake media, false information, multiple truths. These things, are a problem.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect place to leave it with some advice for the youth. But I think that advice is good for all of us, actually. I just want to thank you so much for doing this tonight. This
My
conversation
pleasure.
was incredibly meaningful. I mean, I always say, did I learn something? And I learned a ton. And I just loved hearing your perspective so much. So thank you so much. There's obviously a lot more to be learned by everybody, but there's a lot more to be learned from you. And so I'm sure I speak for everybody on this call when I say, I hope I can talk with you again soon. And I hope that you can meet my students, because they are absolutely incredible and worthy and fierce and brilliant and all of the things that humans are, and all unique. So I'll say good night from Slate School to everyone who's joined us. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, Jason. And I'll just conclude the way we conclude all of our meetings at Slate School by saying positive rice to everybody. Positive rice. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Have a great night. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.